watching West Dakota Fox News at 9 with Anna Schleisman and meteorologist Henry Blakes. Your first news of the night starts right now on West Dakota Fox News at 9.
The historic spring blizzard raged today, closing roads, canceling flights, and leaving tens of thousands without power. This was the scene on I-29 today, so it's not surprising portions were closed, along with sections of I-94 and Highway 13 in the eastern part of the state and into South Dakota. Well, several flights were canceled to and from Bismarck today. Daniel joins us now from the airport with a closer look at those weather impacts. Daniel.
Anna, that's right. 4 flight arrivals to Bismarck Airport from Minneapolis, Denver, and Chicago are delayed. Bismarck Airport just announced that the 5 a.m. flight to Minneapolis for tomorrow is also expected to be delayed. Take a look at earlier when travelers were still checking in for their flights as they are now. Frontier and United are allowing customers scheduled to fly through the Plains region Thursday to rebook their tickets at no cost. Also, Delta is waiving fees for travelers who wish to change their flights. As travel conditions change, so do the flight plans. You can see behind me that snow is accumulating here, and that's what we're seeing here at Bismarck Airport. Henry, how are we seeing conditions across the region?
Yeah, across the region, still dealing with blizzard conditions across much of the south central and southeastern first warrant viewing area. But quickly letting you know about the road closures. I-94 remains closed from Jamestown to Fargo. I-29 remains closed from Canada all the way down to Sioux Falls. I-29, that is. And this is going to be the case and linger overnight with these road closures. While we still have a little bit of daylight, here's a look at the NDOT snapshot in Ashley. Blizzard conditions occurring there. Jamestown, I-94 remains closed, and Fargo, things are getting worse as we lose daylight. So if you don't need to travel across the south central, southeast, please do not, because even no travel advisories extending from Linton into Ellendale, Ashley, Lisbon, and surrounding areas. Snow coming down even across the capital city region. Things aren't totally terrible across Morton and Burleigh counties, but the farther east you head of Highway 83, that's where things really go downhill. I'll have more details on what more to expect later on, including some recent snowfall totals.
Thanks, Henry. Well, former North Dakota Lieutenant Governor Drew Wrigley has been confirmed again to serve as U.S. Senator for the state. Wrigley served as Lieutenant Governor from 2010 to 2016 under then-Governor Jack Dalrymple and was appointed by President George W. Bush to serve as the North Dakota U.S. Attorney from 2001 to 2009. Well, Mandan man is accused of threatening to burn down a home with a woman and child inside. When Mandan police responded to a call last night, they saw large pools of gas on the floor. The victim told officers 72-year-old Robert Teskey got drunk, grabbed a gas can, and threatened to set the house on fire no matter who was inside. Teskey told police he wanted everyone out of the house and that he could burn down his own house. Teskey's charged with arson, reckless endangerment, and terrorizing. And after a vote on Tuesday, Superintendent Dr. Lana Dakota is suspended with pay. Dakota, who's led the district since 2010, confirms that the Belcourt School Board did suspend her, but declined to comment further. The reason for her suspension is unclear, but we do know the state began an audit of the school board's finances last year. We've reached out to the board and the district, as well as an attorney for Dakota. Keith Lavallee is serving as acting superintendent. Well, Governor Burgum has been busy signing new bills into law. DUI records will now be sealed if a person's record stays otherwise clean for 7 years, excluding licensed commercial drivers. Tampering with critical infrastructure like pipelines is now very clearly illegal, and violators are subject to 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. And if an organization conspires with individuals, the fine jumps to $100,000. And previously shortchanged funds will be fed with millions of dollars of oil tax money. The legislation will transfer $64.3 million to the Common School Trust Fund later this year and $128 million to the Resources Trust Fund over as many as 2 decades. By unanimous vote, the state Senate has overridden Governor Burgum's veto of a bill that he calls legislative overreach. It now goes to the House, which is also expected to override the governor. The bill gives a group of legislators known as the Budget Section Spending Authority in place of the whole body. A similar fight ended up in the state Supreme Court last session, and the court ruled in Burgum's favor. The Senate also thwarted the governor's plan to shutter the Dakota Women's Correctional and Rehabilitation Center in New England. They voted 43-4 to continue funding the prison, but did endorse the possibility of moving the inmates and housing minimum security male inmates there. The House, governor, and corrections officials must all agree to the plan. Women's prison officials say they were never consulted about the move. Well, looking ahead to the 2020 ballot, voters will get a say in how the state constitution can be changed. Legislators approved a ballot measure allowing amendments to return to them after the people vote. If they pass it, it's good to go. But if they reject it, the voters will get a chance to override it. Opponents say 2018's Measure 1 is why they're dealing with this issue now.
We have tried to do an ethics commission through the legislature, and it didn't work. So the people said, okay, you're not going to do it, legislature, we'll take care of it.
It is a direct response to a pattern that we're seeing in North Dakota, which was detailed in the testimony of the bill, that for example, the last 4 constitutional amendments have all been funded by out-of-state interests.
Senator Hogue says constitutional amendments, like laws, should have public hearings before they're enacted. Legislation was introduced to provide $50 million in interest money from North Dakota's oil tax savings account to fund the proposed Theodore Roosevelt Library in Medora. It must be matched by $100 million in private funds to start building. This is in line with Governor Burgum's push for the library's construction. The bill also provides $10 million from the state's legacy fund earnings to digitize presidential documents at Dickinson State University. Well, the chambers are divided on removing state taxes on Social Security benefits, but other bills may pave the way for a compromise. A House bill would keep $21 million in the pockets of North Dakota seniors. The Senate bill, $2.2 million. Senator Jim Dotzenrod expects that to go even higher.
Kind of expecting the next time we meet in another day or two that we'll get an offer from them to go up a little bit.
We're not against that, completely, but if there's a mechanism or a way for us to provide the broad tax relief for everybody, that's the direction we'd like to go.
Hedlund says he wants to advance a proposal to use legacy fund earnings to offset income taxes. And the state's largest agency budget, the Department of Human Services, is ready for a vote. And it does include higher Medicaid reimbursement rates for medical providers. Governor Burgum wanted to change the rates, which would have cut reimbursements to hospitals by $200 million. While the rates stay the same, the distribution will change in an attempt to level the playing field.
The intent of that amendment is to make sure that there is adequate funding and resources shared across the state based on the services provided, whether urban or rural, specialty or non-specialty.
The bigger hospitals would have the same rate and the smaller hospitals would have the same rate. But at this point, we're analyzing that, whether or not that's going to be, good or bad. But my understanding right now, it's budget neutral.
If the bill passes the House, it will have to go through a conference committee for fine-tuning. In a session-long battle between landowners and sportsmen, the House passed a version of a bill to restrict access to land to everyone except hunters. The House removed sections about letting landowners post their land physically or online. It will need final edits by both chambers before it is sent to the governor. Well, Nebraska has suffered heavy agricultural damage due to flooding, and many are concerned the losses will impact the price of beef this summer. Jordan Verdadero shares what we know now about the consumer impact.
Despite North Dakota's efforts to help feed Nebraska cattle by trucking hay south, the state is suffering tremendous losses.
An estimated 1 million head of cattle perished in those historic floods.
Julie Ellingson of North Dakota Stockmen's Association says it's too soon to tell exactly what the losses are.
And those losses are across all kinds of different classes, from adult cows to small calves to feeder cattle, everything in between.
Eugene Grainer of Heartland Investors says the losses in Nebraska have caused the price of cattle to go up in the past month.
Conversations on blogs are maybe 1 million head of cattle were lost in the floods. That's not likely, because in Nebraska alone there's about 7 million head of cattle total, and so 1 million head lost would be a dramatic loss of cattle. You'd see it in every feed yard. A lot of the cattle did get out of the way. There are losses. But to quantify this is going to take the USDA probably until July when we see our next semi-annual herd.
Grainer says it's uncertain what the impact of cattle losses will have on the price of beef this summer. Ellingson says the North Dakota Stockmen's Association has put together the Nebraska In Need Disaster Relief Program to raise $10,000 for ranchers and farmers impacted by the flood. In Bismarck, I'm Jordan Verdadero reporting for your news leader.
And Bismarck's fire and police departments went head-to-head tonight in the Guns and Hoses Brave the Shave competition. John Selling tells us what the buzz is about.
Real-life heroes look forward to this night every year, a chance to raise money for children with cancer, and a chance to compete with one another. At the beginning of the night tonight, Team Fire was leading by more than $1,600.
Dozens of volunteers are shaving heads, beards, and eyebrows to raise money for Brave the Shave. Every person that stepped up placed their vote for police or fire.
It's a small part that all of us can give back to them. They suffer tremendously watching their young child go through something like this. I can't even imagine it. So we're just trying to do whatever we can to ease that burden.
And even though it's for the kids, whoever raises more money has bragging rights over their first responder friends for the next year.
In addition, BNSF and North American Coal are each donating $100 for every head shaved here tonight.
Well, I did. In Bismarck, I'm John Selling for your news leader.
Williston residents are also paying it forward after a tragic loss. 15-year-old Lexi Meduna was killed in a car accident south of Tioga on Sunday. Deja Brew is donating a portion of their proceeds to Meduna's family, which will be matched by Elite Health and Fitness, Cooks on Main, and an anonymous donor. Lexi's friends say she was outgoing and loved to dance.
She had a really good heart for everyone, and I loved her laugh.
Three Beans Espresso is also donating, and those funds are being matched by the Shop Bar, One Stop Trailers, Buster's Bar, and an anonymous personal donor. A GoFundMe page has also been started in her memory. At last check, it was about $3,400 shy of the $20,000 goal. Well, yesterday there were complaints he was being spied on. Today he was arrested. The developing story next.
And visibility is reduced across the Bismarck-Mandan area, but it gets even worse the farther east you head of town. I'll have your forecast coming up next.
Yesterday, we told you WikiLeaks editor-in-chief said that Julian Assange was spied on in the Ecuadorian embassy. Today, Assange was arrested. Ray Bogan breaks down his charges.
This is a dark day for journalism.
British police arresting Julian Assange at the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Authorities taking the WikiLeaks founder out of the building after Ecuador revoked his citizenship and political asylum, which allowed him to seek refuge there for nearly 7 years. The 47-year-old turning to the embassy for help in 2012 while facing extradition to Sweden on sexual assault charges, which have been dropped. He has now been found guilty of violating his bail agreement. Assange is also accused of conspiring to hack into a classified U.S. government computer with Chelsea Manning in 2010.
The First Amendment is not a license to harm the country. It's not a license to, for reckless behavior.
He has done a lot of harm to the United States of America, and he should pay for that.
This case is unlikely to be resolved anytime soon. A lawyer for Assange says he will fight extradition to the U.S., and a British government minister says Assange will not be sent here if he will face the death penalty.
This precedent means that any journalist can be extradited for prosecution in the United States for having published truthful information about the United States.
U.S. officials say he put American national security at risk and threatened military forces, diplomats, and covert sources. Assange has not so far been charged in relation to the Russian hacking of the Democrats during the 2016 election. Well, the first prominent Democrat faces charges in connection with the special counsel Robert Mueller's probe. Greg Craig, a White House counsel under the Obama administration, has been indicted for making false statements and concealing material information related to work he performed for Ukraine in 2012. His lawyers calling it unfair and misleading. Craig is set to enter a plea in federal court Friday afternoon. Well, embattled attorney Michael Avenatti is facing 36 criminal counts after being indicted by a federal grand jury in Los Angeles. Avenatti is now being accused of fraud, embezzlement, failure to pay taxes, perjury, and other financial crimes. On Twitter, Avenatti stated that he intends to fully fight all the charges and plead not guilty. The new indictment comes 2 weeks after Avenatti was charged in another federal case. While legal storms are raging, how's this Midwest storm looking, Henry?
Hey, well, the way things are, roads do remain closed. No travel advisories for Linton into Ellendale, Ashley, Lisbon, and surrounding areas, but road closures. Lots of roads closed, but the major highways and interstates, yes. I-94 remains closed from Jamestown to Fargo. I-29 remains closed from Canada all the way down to Sioux Falls due to blizzard conditions. Visibility only at 3/4 of a mile in Bismarck, Mandan. Hettinger, 4-mile visibility. All this due to the snow, but notice little to no visibility across the southeastern portion of the viewing area. Only 1-mile visibility. Mobridge, 2-mile visibility in Aberdeen, where blizzard warnings do remain in effect from Fargo down into the Mobridge area. Aberdeen, also Ellendale, Lemoore, surrounding areas in red. Blizzard warning through early tomorrow afternoon. Jamestown down into Linton, Ashley, as well as Sioux County, Corson, and Campbell counties. Winter storm warnings for you. Winter weather advisories from Wells County down through Kidder, Burley, Morton, and Grant counties. Looking at first warn Sky Tracker Doppler radar, snow is still coming down even across the capital city region, but things are really bad. Fargo, Jamestown, and points on southward. Blizzard conditions are occurring right now. As far as snow accumulation, so far, remember, these are places that it is still snowing. Latest reports, Ashley at 7 inches, still snowing. Combe, Lemoore, 6 inches, still snowing. Same goes for Fargo, 5 inches so far. So these totals are going to increase overnight, where some places, especially in South Dakota, have already received over well more than a foot of snow. The blizzard conditions continue tonight. Interstates and roads likely to remain closed for tonight as well. These conditions continue at least through the first half of your Friday. Snow still continuing across the eastern half of the region tomorrow. The west, you're looking pretty good. Dry, sunshine starting to break out from Montana and the far west, but the east is where the troubles are going to be. Additional snow accumulation likely anywhere from 4, maybe more inches for some, especially across the far southeast. What about the wind? Well, that's going to continue tonight as well. Notice as we wake up in the morning, wind gusts nearing 20 miles per hour, but still overnight, that's where things are going to be the most dangerous because we can't really see anything as it is right now. Temperatures right now mostly in the 20s and 30s. That east and northeast wind continuing 15 to 30 miles per hour with gusts near 40 east of the capital city region. Looking at your weather in motion, notice that tomorrow by lunchtime, still a little on chilly side. We're only at the freezing mark. The north and west, you'll be nearing that 40-degree mark because, well, no snow and decent conditions for you. What about the week ahead? The weekend looks great. Still a little cool, but 40s aren't too bad. A bit breezy on Monday, but by the next work week, we should be back in the 50s.
Well, pushing it may not be the best training method for young athletes. We'll tell you why next. Well, excelling in sports is a good thing, unless it means long-term health implications for young athletes. Jack Springate looked into what's being called the youth sports epidemic.
Minot State senior athlete Aaron Bernal is no stranger to Tommy John surgery.
My first surgery wasn't until right after my freshman year in college. The second time I was actually 10 months post-op from my first one.
Bernal made baseball his primary year-round sport at the age of 10 and was under the knife for Tommy John before he turned 20.
The real confusing part is that, in fact, when athletes do specialize early, they do get better at that sport. The trouble is, down the road, something has to give. So that's kind of the problem we're starting to see in athletes specializing in that sport early.
More and more research is beginning to show a link between early specialization in sports and overuse with career-altering injuries down the line. Now, the son of the baseball player from which this procedure gets its namesake is using this philosophy to keep youth athletes off the operating table.
When you compete more than 8 months a year, research is 70 to 90% increase. It's the single greatest risk factor in injury when you specialize early before the age of 13.
If these numbers don't convince you, John says to think about some of these real-life late bloomers.
The Tillmans, the Urlachers, the Kobe's, the Jeters, the Brady's. The ones that struggled did exactly how you're supposed to and were also very gifted genetically.
John and Heilman agree the youth sports culture needs to change. And it starts with parents and coaches. In Minot, I'm Jack Springate reporting for your news leader.
Well, a new study warns that supplements may cause pregnancy complications. Researchers in Washington, D.C. and Scotland looked at data from 74 published studies, and they found a small link between certain herbal products and increased risks of pregnancy complications, including preterm birth and C-section. But researchers are quick to point out this is not proof and more research is needed. Well, 3, 2, 1, history. A series of space firsts next. SpaceX is in the business of sending items to space, and today was a series of firsts. It sent satellites into space for the U.S. military and other government agencies, but today's launch was the first paid mission. A Falcon Heavy rocket carrying a communication satellite for a Saudi Arabian firm lifted off from Kennedy Space Center, and all 3 of the rocket's boosters successfully returned to Earth. Well, they must have had clearer weather than us, Henry.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, conditions are bad. Bismarck, Mandan on south and east, where we'll be waking up to snow across the south central, southeastern region in the morning. Blizzard conditions for some still likely. Elsewhere, you're going to be dry and a little bit chilly, though. Highs tomorrow mostly in the 30s, a few 40s, but the weekend's looking good. A bit breezy on Monday, but we'll be back into the 50s by then. But I-94 and I-29, those closures will remain in effect overnight.
All right, so if we can weather this storm,
yes,
then it's smooth sailing. All right, thanks so much, guys. Have a good night.